When you think about the big players in African betting, South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, they usually spring to mind first.
They definitely do. They're the established ones, right?
Exactly. But today, we're doing something a little different. We're going to zero in on Ethiopia. Now, this is a market that might not be on everyone's list, but our sources suggest there's some serious potential bubbling up there.
That's right. This deep dive is all about pulling together what our sources are telling us about the Ethiopian betting scene. We want to get a handle on what's happening right now and, really understand what makes it a market to watch closely based on the info we've got.
Precisely. We're talking Ethiopia, East Africa, incredibly rich history, and get this, projected over 130 million people by 2025. And it's undergoing this, quiet transformation in its betting sector.
Especially with online sports betting now being illegal. That's a key signal our sources are highlighting.
Right. And for you listening, maybe you want to get up to speed quickly on a new area. Our goal here is to basically extract the most important nuggets from these sources.
You go do that clear picture of this emerging market without getting bogged down in, unnecessary detail.
Okay, so let's kick off with the numbers. Demographics. Our sources are projecting, like I said, over 130 million people soon. That makes it the second most populous country in Africa.
Just behind Nigeria. That scale alone is, it's significant.
And here's a fascinating point from the data. How young the population is. We're talking over 70% under the age of 30.
Mm-hmm. That's what they call a population dividend. A huge group of young people who can really power growth in things like the digital economy, entertainment.
And betting fits right into that, potentially. It's a club insight our sources point to.
Definitely. Now, economically, the sources classify Ethiopia as low income. The GDP per capita estimate for 2023 was around, $1,272?
Yeah, about that. But importantly, the same data shows real economic growth recently. Agriculture, infrastructure, even fintech are seeing progress.
And if you connect those dots again, based on our sources, that growth, even from a lower base, it creates fertile ground, doesn't it?
Yeah. For
the betting market to expand.
For sure. If you're thinking long-term investment, that combination of a young population and economic momentum, our analysis suggests that might be more attractive than just looking at current income levels.
Agreed. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Culture and language. Ethiopia is unique based on our research.
We're very diverse religiously. You've got a large Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo church following about 44%, and then a significant Muslim population, roughly 34%, mostly in the east and south, and other groups too.
And culturally, this is really interesting. Our sources emphasize that since Ethiopia wasn't formally colonized by European powers, it's kept its own distinct social systems, traditional values.
Which has big implications for betting operators, right?
Huge. It screams localization. You can't just bring in a generic platform or marketing campaign. Our sources make that very clear. Needs to be tailored.
Makes sense. And language adds another layer. Amharic is official, but the data says over 80 languages, maybe 200 dialects spoken.
Yeah, Oromo and Tigrinya are major ones too. So while you might see some English in business or education.
For reaching actual betting users effectively, multilingual support seems pretty essential. That's what the information suggests.
It raises that question, doesn't it? How do you engage across all those languages and dialects while respecting the unique culture? It's a challenge.
So how are people actually connecting? Let's look at the 2025 data points on connectivity. Digital adoption. It's still early days, but growing.
Steadily growing, yeah. Mobile connections, internet access, social media use, it's all trending up.
What really jumps out from the data is mobile. 85.4 million active connections. That's nearly 64% of the population.
And almost all of those, 98.2%, are broadband level. 3G, 4G, maybe even some 5G access. That's a big jump year over year, something our sources flag.
Internet users specifically, though, the number's lower. 28.6 million according to our info. That's about 21.3% penetration.
Which means, yes, there's a huge untapped population, around 105 million people not online yet.
But still, 28 million internet users. That's not a small number in absolute terms. It's a base to build on.
For sure. And social media is booming too, relatively speaking.
Yeah.
8.3 million active users.
Yeah.
It's only 6.2% of the population.
It grew nearly 18% year over year. That's fast growth.
Very fast. And Facebook is the main platform there, according to our sources.
Yeah.
So the takeaway seems to be, if you're an early mover in betting,
you've got to focus on digital, mobile first, and make sure your content really resonates locally, culturally, linguistically. The data points that way.
Okay, so what about the legal side? What's actually allowed in Ethiopia right now, according to our sources?
Well, since 2012, sports betting both online and in shops lottery and land-based casinos are legal, though the casinos seem to be just in Addis Ababa for now.
Right. But the key thing our sources highlight is what's not clearly regulated. Online casino games, slots, roulette, that kind of thing.
Creates a bit of a gray area, doesn't it?
Exactly. And it probably pushes some players towards offshore sites for those games, though the sources don't quantify that.
So who's in charge of regulating the legal stuff?
That would be the National Lottery Administration, the NLA. It sits under the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development. They handle the rules, licenses, oversight.
And the main laws governing this. Our sources mention a 2009 regulation and, more recently, a 2021 sports betting lottery directive.
Correct. But, crucially, based on our understanding of the material, those pieces of legislation only cover the things that are explicitly legal sports betting, lottery. They don't address online casinos.
Leaving that gap we mentioned, okay, what about cost? If you want to get a license, what are we talking?
The initial fee, according to our information, is 500,000 Ethiopian birr. That's roughly 3,446.
In renewals?
100,000 birr.
And then there's tax. How does that work?
It's quite structured, based on our sources. The NLA gets a 15% commission on ticket revenue. Importantly, that's a turnover tax.
Meaning it's on the total amount wagered, not just processed.
Exactly. That's a big chunk right off the top. Then there's also a 15% tax on player winnings, which also goes to the NLA. And finally, 0.5% of total revenue has to go toward social good initiatives.
Wow, that 15% turnover tax? Operators would really need to factor that into their models. Our sources suggest that's a key consideration.
Definitely a significant cost. Okay, the license application itself. Any specific hurdles?
One big one from our sources. You need at least one Ethiopian co-founder involved in the company.
Though apparently that doesn't apply if you're just a foreign company providing B2B software.
Right. And other conditions. Standard stuff like company registration, a business license, a TIN certificate, that's their tax ID number.
And the process involves submitting a business plan, showing you have proper office space, putting up a bank guarantee of 1.5 million birr.
Paying that $500K birr license fee, and then you have to get operational within 2 months of getting approved.
So it's a defined path, but our sources indicate those initial setup requirements, especially the guarantee and the fee, are pretty substantial.
Okay, let's paint a picture of the Ethiopian bettor based on what we've gathered. The market's definitely heating up, right? Especially for online sports betting.
Yeah, it's starting to get mentioned alongside places like Kenya and Nigeria more often. It's emerging.
And the drivers seem to be that huge young population we talked about, a real passion for sports, and people getting more comfortable with digital entertainment.
Those elements together, highlighted in our sources, suggest a potentially very active user base.
And what are they betting on? Is it mainly football?
Overwhelmingly football, yeah. Just like many places. Our sources list everything, the local Ethiopian Premier League, but also the big European leagues like the EPL, La Liga.
Champions League.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And major international tournaments, World Cup, African Cup of Nations. Activity apparently spikes massively during those.
Any other sports get a look in?
Athletics get some attention, according to the info, especially long-distance running during the Olympics. Seems driven by national pride, which makes sense.
Yeah, Ethiopia has amazing runners.
Exactly. Tennis and cricket have a much smaller betting interest, based on our sources. Football is king. And remember, we're talking mostly about young people. The median age is just 19.
So if you want to reach these young, football-mad bettors, how do you promote? What channels are working, according to our research?
The strategies highlighted are pretty digital-focused. Facebook marketing is big, TikTok for short video content.
Telegram, too, for community management.
Yeah, Telegram seems important, and affiliate marketing is also mentioned as an effective channel.
Looking at the bigger picture then, what are the main opportunities our sources point to in Ethiopia?
Well, the big one is getting in relatively early. High growth potential in a market that isn't fully developed yet. You have a chance to become a leading brand.
And the massive interest in sports, especially football, gives you a sort of built-in audience, doesn't it?
It provides that natural traffic, yeah. Plus, unlike more mature markets, you're not necessarily fighting against deeply entrenched, dominant competitors yet. Competition isn't as intense, our sources suggest.
But it's not all smooth sailing. What are the challenges flagged in our material?
The biggest one seems to be that regulatory ambiguity around online casinos. That creates uncertainty, potential risks.
And that 15% turnover tax we discussed. That's a significant financial hurdle.
Definitely. Another challenge is internet connectivity. While mobile access is growing fast, Overall internet penetration is still quite low.
Which limits your immediate online customer base.
It does. Although, as you said earlier, even that 21% penetration represents millions of people because the total population is so large. And critically, our sources mention the rise of mobile money.
Like Ethio Telecom's Telebur. And Safaricom's M-Pesa's there now too, right?
Exactly. With tens of millions of users combined, they provide that essential payment infrastructure, which helps overcome some banking huddles.
Any other challenges? What about social factors?
Our sources do mention some socio-cultural considerations. There's been public debate, apparently, about potential addiction issues related to sports betting, even calls to ban it at times.
So responsible operation is going to be key. You need to be mindful of that context.
Absolutely crucial. So summing it all up, based on our sources, Ethiopia's betting market isn't illegal. It's actually moving towards more legalization and structure.
Sports betting, online and retail, lottery, land-based casinos, those are legal. Online sports betting is popular and growing.
But that lack of specific online casino regulation is the key area to watch. It's both a challenge now and maybe an opportunity if policies change later.
And for anyone thinking about entry, yes, there are requirements. The company set up, the fees, the guarantee, our sources detail those. But the potential upside,
driven by the demographics, the passion for sports, the developing digital scene, it makes Ethiopia a really interesting early bird prospect in African betting, according to our analysis.
Okay, so let's quickly recap the main takeaways from our sources. We've seen Ethiopia's huge demographic potential, especially its youth.
We've looked at the legal situation. Online sports betting is a go, but online casinos are in that gray zone.
Football's massive popularity as a key driver for betting interest.
We've touched on both the clear opportunities for early movers and the real challenges, like regulation and taxation.
So wrapping up this deep dive, the thought I'm left with, considering all this information, is really about that risk-reward calculation.
How do you weigh the risks of a market where the rules are still evolving, especially for online casinos,
against the potential upside of tapping into this young, increasingly digital population that absolutely loves sports? It's a fascinating dynamic.
It really is. And hopefully this exploration of our sources gives you a solid foundation. But of course, there are always more layers.
Definitely. Specific strategies, how regulations might change.
Yeah.
Lots to keep an eye on. We'd encourage you to dig deeper into what interests you most and track how this market continues to develop.